Well, great afternoon to everyone. Hopefully everyone's having a great day. We will bring this Subcommittee of Education and Economic Development to order. We're going to start off with the University of Baltimore budget analyst, Sarah Baker, will get us started.
Thank you. So I'm going to start with Exhibit 1 on page 4, which shows the trends in first-time applications, which reached a high of 857 in fall of 2017, and then fell almost 40% by 2019, which UBAL attributes to the uncertainty of if they would continue to have a freshman program. By fall 22, applications bottomed out at 298, and the acceptance rates also declined, resulting in only 30 for first-time students enrolling in 22. And UB attributed this to the lingering effects of the pandemic had on recruitment efforts, which impacted in-person events. For fall 23, recruitment efforts gained full momentum with the hiring of a director of admissions and fully staffing the office. And according to UBALT, the new student decline stopped and moderately reversed for 23, with applications up 14.4% and 31 students enrolling in fall. Exhibit 2 on page 6 shows a trend in undergraduate enrollment, which declined for a 9th year, but the rate of decline has slowed. Overall, undergraduate enrollment was down 7% or 96 students. And this was mainly driven by 101 students not returning, which has been an ongoing issue, and it was only amplified by the pandemic. And this is of concern because students who stop out may lose momentum towards working towards their degree. While the number of transfers did increase by 7, since 2015, there has been a 61% decline in the number of transfer students. And since UBALT offers a majority of upper-level courses, they rely on transfers for enrollment growth. The decline in undergraduate enrollment has resulted in a flip in the proportion of undergraduate and graduate students, and this is illustrated in Exhibit 3 on page 7. So over the past 10 years, undergraduates went from comprising 54.1% of enrollment to 43.1%, while graduate students now account for 58.7% of enrollment. UBALT has implemented a multifaceted enrollment and recruitment strategy that is listed on page 7, which includes more in-person events and partnering with various organizations and community colleges. We asked the president to comment on the challenge of stabilizing and increasing undergraduate enrollment. I would note that UBALT has been engaging Baltimore City High School students through its dual enrollment programs, which since spring 2017 has offered college coursework to 2,391 students. And as shown on Exhibit 4 on page 8, 64% of those students went on to enroll in college, with 42% going to a 4-year institution and 22% enrolling in a 2-year college. Turning to Exhibit 5 on page 9 in retention rates, after improving to 76% with the 2020 cohort, the second-year rate declined to 67% with the 22 cohort, which can be attributed to the impact the pandemic had on students returning to campus. After improving to 56% with the 2019 cohort, the third-year rate decreased to 53% with the 2 succeeding cohorts. Exhibit 6 on page 10 shows the 6-year graduation rate, and overall the rates have remained fairly stable across all cohorts, ranging between 54% and 56%. Exhibit 7 on page 11 compares the 6-year graduation rates of Pell and non-Pell first-time full-time students and transfers. And overall, transfers graduated at a much higher rate than the first-time students. And while in 22 the rates improved for the transfer students, it did decline for first-time full-time students. Turning to affordability on page 8, Exhibit 8 on page 12 compares the cost of attendance to the average net price. And in 22, the average net price was 47.4% lower than the published cost of attendance. And those from a lower family income, the net price was 55.5% lower than the published cost. Exhibit 9 on page 13 shows spending on institutional aid, which has declined by 63.9% to $1.5 million in 22. And this reflects a continuing decline in enrollment, which fell by 52.5% during this time period. I would note that UBAL has been strategic in their awards by focusing not only on those students with the greatest need, but those who are high academic performers. On page 14 is discussion regarding the impact of the FAFSA simplification. And overall, UBAL estimates 38 students will lose their Pell Award, and 14 students who started in spring 23 who might have qualified for a Pell Award will not qualify. And in addition, UBAL estimates they would need $75,000 for new transfers who might have received a reward but would not get a reward for this coming academic year. So altogether, if UBAL were to keep these students whole, it would cost them about $500,000. But given their current financial situation, UBALT would need additional funding to make these students whole. Exhibit 10 on page 16 shows budget changes by program areas for 23 and 24. Expenditures increased by $0.8 million, while education and general expenditures increased by $4.3 million. And overall, spending increases across all program areas are related to the annualization of the 23 general salary increase. And yet the institutional support increases by $1.3 million partly due to filling key positions and expenses related to Middle States accreditation. And the $4 million decrease in the spending of operations, maintenance, and plants is due to a larger than budgeted transfer to plant fund due to the availability of federal relief funds in 23. Turning to Exhibit 11 on page 18 in the proposed budget, when excluding the impact of the 24 general salary increase in 25, state funds declined 4.5% or $2.7 million. The decrease is due to $1.5 million related to increasing the turnover to 6% and $1.8 million of one-time legislative additions. The allowance does include over $86,000 for various statewide costs. On Exhibit 12 on page 20, you can see the impact the declining enrollment has had on the composition of unrestricted revenues. Tuition and fees went from comprising 55% in 2019 to 42% in 2024, while state funds went from accounting from 33% of the funds to 50% of revenues during the same time period. This exhibit also highlights a distinction between UBALT and residential campuses in which auxiliary enterprises can account for 30% of revenues compared to 4 to 5% at UBALT. Exhibit 13 on page 22 compares authorized and filled positions between 19 and 24. So in order to address the budget shortfalls due to the continuing enrollment decline, UBALT has eliminated 56 regular positions between 19 and 24. Institutional support had the largest percentage of unfilled positions at 17.9%. And in student services, 10.1% of the positions were not filled, which highlights the challenges institutions have in filling these frontline positions. The recommendation is on page 23, and to see the USM overview for system-wide recommendations. And that concludes my presentation.
Thank you, Ms. Baker. We appreciate that. Any question for our analysts? Seeing none, we'll bring up our University of Baltimore president, and you can bring up your panel as well at this time.
Good afternoon, Mr. Vice Chair and members of the subcommittee. Kurt Schmoke, President of the University of Baltimore. Joining me at the table is Ralph Mueller, our new provost of the university, and Barbara Augenbaugh, who is our Chief Financial Officer and Vice President of Business Affairs. I want to thank you very much for giving us this opportunity to speak today. We are very pleased. We're heading towards our centennial in 2025, and I can say in summary that the good news actually outweighs the bad news regarding the university. I want to also thank our analyst, Sarah Baker, for her thoughtful analysis. She visited our campus. We had a great conversation, and I look forward to working with her. She asked that we comment briefly on enrollment issues, which I'll do, but I just wanted to take one moment to talk about two quick things that I believe are important because I know the members of the committee, who have, some of whom I've visited with, have interest in this matter. We operate a degree granting program at the Jessup Correctional Institution. Since 2016, we have had 136 men in our program. We currently have 46 individuals who are taking degree granting programs. We have had some graduates of that program, and in fact, we are aware that 3 of them are seeking postgraduate work now. This is something that we believe to be vitally important for the community. We say that we're not only the University of Baltimore, but the University for Baltimore, and we think that that is an important contribution that we make to the community. The other thing is that since we were here previously, we have been designated by the federal government as a predominantly black institution. As you know, there are separate distinctions. HBCUs are historic, but PBIs are institutions that have at least 40% African-American student body with other indicia in there related to income. So we are very proud of this, and this gives us an opportunity to get federal grants that are designated for PBIs. One final thing on the, there was a note in Ms. Baker's presentation that our afternoon, Madam Chair. There was an indication or note that Ms. Baker mentioned about the shift from undergraduate to graduate proportion. We have done that as a deliberate strategy of the university. We have determined that we would like to become 60% graduate and professional, 40% undergraduate, with the bulk of that 40% being transfers from community college. So we recognize that we've had some challenges on the enrollment side in our undergraduate body, but the decline has slowed. We believe that it's kind of bottomed up. We'll start to move up. And in some ways, we're a tale of two cities, because the law school is doing exceptionally well in terms of admissions and producing outstanding graduates. So our retention efforts are being led and coordinated by our provost. Our CFO is keeping us in shape financially, and I believe that our target over the next few years is would be 4,000 students with this mix of 60-40, and we're well on our way to achieving that goal. So we submitted written testimony, and that was kind of the summary, and we'll be glad to take any questions that you may have.
Thank you so much, President Schmoke. I apologize for my tardiness. I had a bill hearing across the hallway at Ways and Means, but thank you for being here. I know you're so busy. You wear a lot of hats, including the new owner of the Orioles. So I'm really excited to see you here.
Ain't over till it's over.
Ain't over till it's over, but I'm feeling good about it.
Thank you, Madam
And so
Chair.
are there any questions for President Schmoke or his team? Seeing none, thank you for your time today.
Thank you very much.
And for all that you do. But I do want to note that our chief counsel here is a UB Law alum. That's why we were chuckling about the outstanding alums from UB Law, as well as, of course, the chair of appropriations.
Well,
Thank you.
and I know your law school also.
It's a great law school, and thank you for being the dean of Howard
That's
University
right.
School of Law.
Good. Great to see you. Thank you all very much.
And that concludes the budget hearing for the University of Baltimore. We'll now be moving to the University of Maryland, Baltimore County. And so we'll begin with a presentation from Sarah Baker.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to start with Exhibit 1 on page 5, which shows the trends in first-time applications, which reach a high of almost 12,000 in 2019. And despite the number of applications declining 6.4% during the pandemic, the number of students enrolled increased 19% to 2,025 in fall 21. For fall 22, there was an uptick in applications and enrollment increased to 2,144 students, representing UMBC's largest incoming class. Exhibit 2 on page 7 shows trends in fall undergraduate enrollment, which declined for a fourth year, decreasing 1.3% or 135 students in fall 23. As you see, enrollment first-time students increased in fall 21 and 22, which was intentional. UMBC aligned these increases with their financial aid optimization strategy. However, UMBC decreased the size of its incoming class for fall 23 in order to ensure they had the financial and human resources needed to ensure the success of these three classes of first-time students. Of concern is the continuing decline in the number of transfers, which have decreased 33.3% since 2018. Turning to Exhibit 3 on page 8 in retention rates, after increasing to its highest rate of 87% with the 22 cohort, the second rate declined to 80% with the 22 cohort. And the 30-year rate also reached a high of 72% with the 22 cohort and declined to 66% to the 22 cohort. And these declines reflect the impact the pandemic had on students returning to campus. I would note since the resumption of normal operations, the second-year retention rate has increased to 82%. Exhibit 4 on page 9 shows the 6-year graduation rates, and overall, the rates have remained fairly stable across all cohorts and improved to their highest level with the 2018 cohorts exceeding 70%. Exhibit 5 on page 10 compares the 6-year graduation rates of Pell and non-Pell first-time full-time students and transfer students. Overall, transfer students tend to graduate at a higher rate than the first-time full-time students, and in 21, all groups reached their highest rates exceeding 70%. Turning to affordability, Exhibit 6 on page 11 compares cost of attendance with the net average price. And I just want to note the decline in 21 is an anomaly due to the campus being closed and the waiving of several mandatory fees due to students attending remotely. So in general, if you compare 22 to 20, the net price has increased 11.9%. Exhibit 7 on page 12 shows spending on institutional aid, which has increased over 50% or $11.1 million since 2017. While spending on scholarships has grown $5.6 million since 2018, that spend on need-based aid has decreased 4.3%. Overall expenditures in need-based aid have comprised a smaller portion of spending, declining from 23.8% in 2018 to 19.2% in 22. So we asked the President to comment on the decline in spending on need-based aid. On page 13 is discussion regarding the impact of the FAFSA simplification. And overall, UMBC estimates 77 students will lose their Pell Award and 344 students could see a reduction in their reward. Since this could have a negative impact on retention and graduating these students, UMBC has decided to make these students whole, which is estimated to cost about $1 million in fiscal 25. Exhibit 8 on page 14 shows the budget changes by program area for 23 and 24. And overall expenditures increased $25.4 million, with education and general expenditures increasing by 31.7. $17.8 million, the increase in instruction is mainly due to additional funding for the College of Engineering and Information Technology and the Division of Professional Studies, which have both seen significant increase in their enrollments. Institutional support grows by $9 million, mainly due to funds related to Empowering Initiative and new positions. And the decrease of $4.6 million you see in academic support is related to expenditures being inadvertently budgeted under instruction. I would note that in 23, UMBC was able to transfer $30.4 million to the fund balance and is listed on page 15. This can be partly related to interest earnings exceeding the budget amount by around $7.5 million and graduate enrollment exceeding projections, resulting in a surplus of revenues. Turning to Exhibit 9 and on page 16 in the proposed budget, when excluding the impact of the 24 general salary increase in the 25 allowance, state funds declined 1.5% or $3.1 million. The decrease is mainly due to $5.7 million related to increasing the turnover to 6%. And the allowance does include over $926,000 to fund various statewide costs. There is $700,000 to increase funding for the Maryland Technology Internship Program, bringing total funding to $1.1 million. And there's also $400,000 as mandated to help with UMBC's research and development activities. In Exhibit 10 on page 17, you can see the impact the pandemic had on the composition of revenues. And prior to 2020, the portion of funds was fairly stable. With the closing of campus in spring 2020 and the refunds provided to students, auxiliary revenues fell by $19.5 million. In 21, with the reduced occupancy of residence hall and de-densifying of campus, auxiliary revenues only accounted for 5% of total revenues, and since then have rebounded with a return to more normal operations and comprise 17% of revenues. Tuition-free fee revenues now comprise 34% of revenues compared to 37% before the pandemic, reflecting a decline in enrollment, and state funds comprise a greater portion of revenue since the pandemic, increasing from 35% to 41% in 24. Exhibit 11 on page 20 compares authorized and filled positions between 19 and 2024. When excluding research and public service, vacancy rates increased from 5.4% to 10.4%. For program areas, instruction, academic support, institution support, and operations and maintenance of plant experienced double-digit percentage increases in the number of unfilled positions. This increase in the number of unfilled positions indicates a continuing challenge of hiring and retaining personnel since the end of the pandemic. We asked the President to comment on these challenges faced in hiring and retaining personnel. The recommendation is on page 21 to see USM overview for system-wide recommendations, and that concludes my presentation.
Thank you very much, Ms. Baker, for your presentation. Are there any questions? Seeing none, we welcome you, Dr. Shears Ashby and team.
Thank you so much. Good afternoon, Chair Smith and Vice Chair Harris. It's a pleasure to see you both again.
Is this history? Is this your first budget hearing?
This is, thank you. I'm so
Welcome.
excited. And members of the committee, thank you so much for having me and giving us the opportunity to testify today. I'd also like to thank Sarah Baker for her excellent analysis. And again, Sarah, it's good to see you. I'm joined at the table today by our Vice President for Administration and Finance, Kathy Detloff. Also joining me in the audience are Christy Michael, AVP for Administration and Finance, and our Vice President of Government Relations and Community Affairs, Candace Dotson-Reed. And I'm also delighted to have one of our staff members, Debbie Michaels, who is a Program Administrative Specialist in the Division of Information Technology. I'll begin by saying that the support for public higher education in the state of Maryland, in particular from the General Assembly, from the governor, and from the University System of Maryland and its Board of Regents is indeed unique, and it is extraordinary. Now in my second year as president of UMBC, I continue to be grateful and energized by the work we're doing every day to educate Marylanders and to contribute to the state's vibrancy, well-being, and economic strength. Chair Smith and committee members, you have received already our written responses to the 2 questions posed of us. If I may, I would like to offer just a few brief words expanding upon the first question regarding need-based financial aid. While it is true that UMBC's need-based aid did decline slightly over the 6-year period from fiscal year 17 through fiscal year 22, it is also true that our students with the greatest need received much more financial aid than they had ever before, not less. And that is because many of those students, in addition to receiving a need-based scholarship, were also eligible and deserving of merit awards. So in fiscal year 22, UMBC awarded $4.3 million, up from $2 million, to 1,045 Pell-eligible students, up from the $2 million to 496 Pell-eligible students in fiscal year 17, so doubling the amount that these highest need students received. And this is just a reflection of just how brilliant these students are. And so in the 5-year period, we were in fact increasing our institutional aid to the students with the highest financial need, but we did it through a combination of merit and need-based aid. And then finally, I just want to briefly mention, not related to either of the 2 questions you posed, but just want to briefly mention our choice program at UMBC, which serves youth in our state who are first-time offenders. A very powerful program for decades, and the dollars that we've asked for are for expansion of that program. And so with that, I thank you for allowing me to expand upon our written response, and I'd be happy to answer any additional questions.
Thank you. Well done. Are there any questions for President Ashby? Seeing none, thank you for being before us today.
Thank you.
We have another witness. Is Deborah Michaels with AFSCME here? How could I not identify you by your lovely green? Great to see you today.
Thank you so much. And before I start my testimony, I just want to say, you said this is her first budget hearing. This is not my first budget hearing, but this is her first budget hearing.
Right.
But she has done, she had big shoes
Absolutely.
to fill. She's done a phenomenal job. She's engaging with the students, which is what Dr. Rabowski
That's
had
right.
done too,
That's
which
right.
is huge. So.
You heard that from AFSCME on the record?
Yes, right? So thank you, Madam Chair and committee members. My name is Debbie Michaels. I want to address the concerns about hiring and retaining personnel since the end of the pandemic. I've worked at UMBC for over 16 years. I'm also the president of the union, so therefore I have knowledge of what is happening all over campus. It begins with retention. We began experiencing a mass exodus of staff in departments that rescinded the ability to telework. We had already proven that a vast majority of our staff were more productive working remotely, but the approval of telework is given to the individual departments and supervisors, which is overtly visible and exposes the inequity of those decisions. Next, we have wage compression. Though we have received COLAs and merit increases recently, years of not receiving those increases during the previous administration has contributed to our salaries not keeping up with the actual cost of living. With the vacancies, We have staff who have remained doing the work in multiple positions. They also witnessed new projects and materials being purchased now when departments stated in the past that they didn't have the budget. This indicates that they're using the funds from the vacancies to fund these projects at the expense of the people who are doing multiple jobs. This affects morale, which leads to people leaving. Institutional knowledge is a valuable asset that has not been taken into consideration with these decisions to compensate staff and offer environments to promote productivity and build strong teams. Lastly, to fill these vacancies, job postings list the bottom of the pay scales, well below the market wages for the skill sets that they are requiring. Those postings are not attracting a quality pool of candidates, and thereby the vacancies remain unfulfilled. We're passionate about serving our students. Having the staff and resources necessary to do our jobs effectively and efficiently will help us make the phenomenal education at UMBC happen. And I thank you for your time.
Thank you so much for your testimony. Thank you for your advocacy, and also thank you for your longstanding service to the UMBC campus community. Are there any questions? Seeing none, thank you for your time today. We appreciate it. I think that's it. Yeah, that concludes today's bill hearing for UMBC. We'll now be moving to state lottery and gaming control. And first, we'll be hearing from Micah Richards. Is this Micah's first time with us?
Yes,
Welcome, Micah.
thank you. Good afternoon, and thank you, Madam Chair, and the citizens of the great state of Maryland for allowing me to speak before you today. My name is Micah Richards, and I will be presenting the Maryland Lottery and Gaming Control Agency Budget Analysis. Starting on page 1, the Maryland Lottery and Gaming Control Agency administers lottery games and the state's casino and sports betting programs to generate revenue for the state. The fiscal '25 budget increases by $62,000 or 0.1% compared to the fiscal '24 working appropriation to a total of $123.4 million. On page 2, the fiscal '24 legislative priority will be discussed later in the presentation. One proposed efficiency appropriation totals $3.8 million in special funds to pay for higher lottery vendor fees. The remaining 2 proposed efficiency appropriations realign funds between programs and fund sources related to funding for the iGaming study, as well for funding for video lottery terminal operations based on current revenue estimates. On page 3, in Exhibit 1, 42% of the fiscal '25 allowance covers the 3 central monitoring and control systems, which accounts for all of the sales and cashing of lottery tickets, instant ticket lottery machines, and all slot machine activity at the casinos. 30% of the allowance covers personnel that reflects salaries and fringe benefits. On page 4 in Exhibit 2, outside of personnel, the largest increase in the fiscal '25 allowance is for fiscal service, which includes financial and special audit engagements of $185,000. The largest decrease of $349,311 is related to the elimination of 4 contractual full-time equivalents. On page 5, there are 34 vacant positions. The Lottery and Gaming Agency have a decrease of 4 contractual full-time positions between the fiscal '24 working appropriation and the fiscal '25 allowance. Of the eliminated full-time positions, 4 were financial investigators for the Gaming Licensing Department. DLS requests for the Lottery and Gaming Agency to discuss the reason for the decrease and how these functions will be performed in fiscal '25. On page 6, Exhibit 3 provides information comparing compensation for retailers among various jurisdictions, including Maryland's neighboring states. Data is for fiscal '23, except where noted. Data for fiscal '22 was used where fiscal '23 data was not available. Maryland has a 6% sales commission and a 3% cashing commission. On page 7 in Exhibit 4, a provision in the Budget Reconciliation and Financing Act of '24 reduce lottery agent sales commissions from 6% to 5.5% of gross lottery sales, and the prize ticket cashing commission from 3% to 2%. Reduced commissions result in an increase in revenue to the general fund. General fund revenues are expected to increase by $2.2 million in fiscal '24 and by $27.2 million in fiscal '25 due to reduced lottery agent sales commissions and prize ticket cashing commissions. On page 8, in Exhibit 5, shows total lottery sales and distribution of those revenues. From fiscal '22 to '23, the operating budget increased by 7.3%. Agent commission earnings increased by 7.8%. Prizes increased by 2.2%. Net general fund revenues increased by 3.2%, and the other disbursements increased by 52.4%. On page 9, in Exhibit 6, MGM National Harbor had the highest casino revenues in fiscal '23 at $895.7 million. From fiscal '22 to '23, revenues for MGM National Harbor increased by 8.8%. Ocean Downs revenues increased by 4.2%. Live revenues decreased by 0.7%. Hollywood Casino Perryville decreased by 5.5%. On page 10 in Exhibit 7, after all video lottery terminal revenue distributions have been made, the Education Trust Fund receives the rest of the dollars. From fiscal '22 to '23, the total video lottery terminal revenues increased by 1.2%. From those revenues, the Education Trust Fund distribution increased by 0.9%, licensee distributions increased by 1.4%, horse racing distributions increased by 1.6%, local impact grant distributions increased by 1.2%, the small minority and women-owned businesses account distribution increased by 1.6%, and the lottery and gaming operating expense distribution increased by 1.7%. On page 11 in Exhibit 8, from fiscal '22 to '23, the table game revenues increased by 6.3%. From those revenues, the Education Trust Fund distribution increased by 6.4%. On page 12 in Exhibit 9, the sports wagering and fantasy competition proceeds distributed to the Blueprint for Maryland's Future Fund totaled $37.8 million in fiscal '23. 55% came from mobile sports wagering proceeds, and 30% came from license fees. The estimated fiscal '24 distribution is expected to increase by 20% compared to fiscal '23. On page 13, DLS recommends the Maryland Lottery and Gaming Control Agency to concur with governor's allowance. On page 14, the 2023 Joint Chairman's Report requested for the Lottery and Gaming Agency to submit published monthly reports for sports wagering with additional information on the major types of bets being placed. In fiscal '24 to date, the Lottery and Gaming Agency submitted and posted the reports on their website from June to December in calendar 2023. The report on iGaming that is also referenced on page 2 under fiscal '24 legislative priority. The details are Section 19 of the fiscal 2024 budget bill added $100,000 in general funds for the Lottery and Gaming Agency to contract with a third party to assist in completing an iGaming study. Separate language in the fiscal '24 budget bill required that the Lottery and Gaming Agency submit a report on iGaming. This report was completed in November 2023. They conducted the study with the Innovation Group. The study detailed the revenue potential of a legal iGaming market in Maryland, the impact of iGaming on casinos and lottery, the iGaming landscape in other states, the use of multi-jurisdictional gaming agreements, and methods to transition players from the legal to the regulated market. The study estimates that the market potential for iGaming in Maryland is more than $900 million in gross revenue. The report also includes an estimate of the impact of iGaming on land-based casino gross gaming revenue, which was noted to be approximately a 10% decline in growth. Lottery sales are 0.04% decline in growth. Electronic bingo machines are it's 10% decline in growth, and off-track betting is near zero growth. That concludes my presentation, and I'm available for any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Richards, for your presentation and your inaugural appearance before us. But there's another bit of history being made. This is the first time the State Lottery and Gaming Control Agency is now in Education and Economic Development. So we welcome John A. Martin. Doctor. Oh, I didn't know you had a question. Go ahead, Delegate
Well, since
Grice.
this is his first time, first of all, you did an outstanding job, but I just want to make sure that we christen you for a question here on your
Yes,
first
please
day.
do.
So,
Please do.
so I lost a bet when the Ravens lost, right? So can I, at least to help me with my comfort level of that loss, did I help fund our schools at all in any way?
Here we go.
Please say I did.
Yes.
All right, yes, thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
No problem. Mr. Martin and team.
Good afternoon, Chair Smith, Vice Chair Harris, and the members of the Education and Economic Development Subcommittee of the House Appropriations Committee. We welcome the opportunity to appear before you today to present the Maryland Lottery and Gaming Control Agency's fiscal 2025 budget. For the record, my name is John Martin. I am the Director of the Maryland Lottery and Gaming Control Agency. To my right is Paula Yoakum, our Chief Financial Officer. Our entourage behind us includes Angela Jones, our Budget Director, and James Butler, Assistant Deputy Director and Chief of Staff. At this time, we'd like to thank the Department of Legislative Services, and particularly Michael Richards, for his excellent work and analysis of our budget. We'd also like to thank Shane Benz and the Department of Budget and Management for their assistance in developing the agency's budget. I'll begin by giving you an update on our current businesses. In FY 2023, our agency contributed nearly $1.6 billion to support the state of Maryland's good causes, including the Maryland Education Trust Fund, the Blueprint for Maryland's Future Fund, the state's general fund impacting public health and safety programs, the state's horse racing industry, the communities and jurisdictions where the state's 6 casinos are located, small, minority, women-owned business programs, and veterans organizations. Lottery ticket sales contributed $714.3 million to the state, while casino gaming revenue contributed $848.1 million, both of which represented year-over-year increases. Meanwhile, sports wagering and fantasy competitions, including daily fantasy sports, combined to contribute another $26.4 million. The Maryland Lottery program has operated for over 50 years and enjoys broad participation across the state, as 74% of adult Marylanders report playing at least one lottery game in the past 12 months. Since its inception in 1973, traditional lottery sales have exceeded $59.6 billion and have contributed more than $19.3 billion in revenue to the state. The mission of the casino gaming program is to generate revenue for the state of Maryland and to create good-paying jobs while maintaining integrity, security, transparency, and fair play. From the opening of Maryland's first casino in September 2010 through the end of FY 2023, slot machine and table game revenues generated by the 6 casinos totaled more than $15.9 billion. Casino gaming contributions to the state through FY 2023 totaled more than $6.9 billion. The distribution of casino gaming revenue is directed by statute. The casinos generated nearly $2.1 billion in gaming revenue from slot machines and table games during FY 2023. That's a 2.9% increase from FY 2022. A U.S. Supreme Court decision in 2018 paved the way for states to legalize sports wagering. Maryland joined a growing list of states to implement sports wagering when voters approved a referendum in November of 2020. As of February 2024, there are 13 retail sportsbooks facilities and 12 mobile online sportsbooks operating in Maryland. Each sportsbook contributes 15% of its taxable win to the Blueprint for Maryland's Future Fund, which supports public education programs. In FY 2023, these contributions totaled nearly $25.3 million and are on a pace to nearly double that in fiscal 2024. And thank you again, Delegate, for your contribution. The agency continues to substantially deepen its organization-wide commitment to emphasizing the importance of responsible play across all lines of business. During FY 2023, the agency began working on a responsible gaming program jointly sponsored by the North American Association of State and Provincial Lotteries, NASPL, that's our industry trade association, and the National Council on Problem Gambling. The agency plans to submit our first application for the sustaining level to CPG later this calendar year. A group of more than a dozen staff members from multiple departments within the agency are spending much of 2024 working on the submission, which will include summaries and documentation of the agency's responsible gaming efforts pertaining to employee training, retailer training, public education and awareness, product oversight, research, and advertising. Agency staff have also increased collaboration with the University of Maryland's Center of Excellence on Problem Gambling, with regular meetings between MLGCA and the Center of Excellence staff to coordinate activities and training opportunities. As it relates to the FY 2025 budget, we concur with the DLS recommended action and request your approval of our FY 2025 budget as submitted. Thank you for your time. We are happy to answer any questions at this time.
Thank you for your presentation, and thank you for adapting it as necessary for the benefit of our committee. Are there any questions? Delegate Harris.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I appreciate your report. This is actually great information for us. So as we saw the awesome Super Bowl on this past Sunday, something stuck out to me when I was looking at some research the other day when I knew you all was coming, is that on Super Bowl Sunday, they estimated that $23.1 billion was going to be bet on that one single game, right? It's about 6 to 8 million adults. And so they went back and I took a look and they said 68 billion was bet in 2020, 4.3 billion in 2021, 7.6 billion in 2022, 16 billion in 2023, and it jumped to 23.1 billion in 2024. My question is, where do we see gaming going for Maryland in the future? In other words, will we continue to see this type of growth in Maryland when it comes to gaming, or do you think that's just a one-off? Because we noticed that there's a sharp incline to betting. The more and more people get used to it, and the more and more apps that comes live for us.
That's an excellent question, and of course, the opportunities are always going to be there for people to participate in sports wagering, whether it's regulated legal gaming, as we have here in the state of Maryland, or the illegal gaming market, which I think more and more we're seeing some inroads and taking people, moving them from the unregulated illegal market towards the regulated legal market, and we're proud to be one of the states that's leading the way in that. Where is it going to go? I wish I could tell you where the ceiling is. I think we continue to work and develop responsible gaming initiatives and programs to make sure that in that growth there are player protections and guardrails so that people can enjoy sports wagering as an entertainment option and not as a bill-paying mechanism.
Right.
And we take pride in the fact that we own that responsibility. So whether it's through our education efforts, our outreach efforts, working with our key partners. As I had said before, we have now 25 sports books between mobile and retail entities. They all go through strenuous responsible gaming program evaluation before they get their license. Those things will continue to grow, but we hope they can have a controlled, sustainable growth that's fun and engaging for the players and generates good revenue for the state.
Absolutely, appreciate it. One quick follow-up for that. So I understand we can't guess on the ceiling. However, we can actually figure out our baseline, right? So what is our baseline over the past couple of years? Like, on average, what does that look like for the state of Maryland?
Well, I wish I could tell you that as well, because I don't know where that is. I mean, each year, whether it's retail sports wagering or mobile, and just from a standpoint, 97% of the wagers are all mobile at this point. So the brick and mortar locations are 3% of the market. So the growth is going to continue to be in the mobile arenas. And that effort is going to continue to grow, and hopefully we can monitor and manage that. But I don't know where the floor really is in that. I think, again, people are going to continue to wager and hopefully bet responsibly.
Absolutely, appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Any additional questions? Do you have a question? Well, you have a few months to consider your strategies for this upcoming season. Thank you so much for your presentation and time, and welcome to EED, and have a great rest of your day. That concludes the budget hearing for today.